Aha. Welcome to the 2026 season of Dropping Pebbles in the Pond. I was tempted to say new and improved, just like the ads on the telly, although you wouldn't think so when I forgot to unmute yourself, would we? Anyway, look, new and improved like the ads on the telly, but then I remembered something from a marketing course I did, gosh, decades ago. And that pointed out that the reality is it can't be both. It can only be new or improved. So which will it be? I'll leave you to decide. What I will say is bigger pebble. Here's the 2026 pebble as opposed to the last pebble, considerably bigger. Bigger pond and bigger ripples, therefore. Not that bigger is always best, of course. As ever, we'd love to know where you're watching from, either live or on replay. So do let us know your location in the comments. And I say us because I might be the only one on screen, but I'm still being supported by my brilliant team working their magic behind the scenes. Mostly, I think about them as Wizards of Oz, kind of pulling the levers behind the curtain whilst I skip along merrily like Dorothy. And if you're lucky, I might even click my heels. But for contrast, there's one team member who has invited me just a few hours ago to bury his head in the sand and leave crabs all around him. So what do you think? Should I? Should I not? Anyway, let's leave that thought right there and focus on the title and subject of this first episode. When competence becomes camouflage. Intriguing, huh? I mentioned it at a celebration event I was at last evening, and one of those in earshot said, I so get that. And maybe it resonates with you too. In fact, when I mention camouflage, I wonder what image immediately comes to mind for you. Kind of all black, ninja style, or army style fatigues, or maybe just a pixelated effect. Whichever is in your mind, the main purpose of camouflage, of course, is to hide altogether, to blend into the surroundings, or to disguise the wearer or the vessel, so they slip by unnoticed. And how many introverts would opt for invisibility as their superpower? In the absence of the invisibility option, though, I wonder how many of us learned very early on that being capable earned us acceptance, praise, safety even. So competence became the part of ourselves we led with first. And if we stripped away the doing, the solving, the reliability and the expertise for a moment, would we still know and like who we are underneath all of that capability? And that's precisely why I think it's relevant for us to explore it here. What happens to us when we as introverts hide behind our competence to avoid detection? How many of us use competence or capability as their invisibility cloak? What starts out as undoubtedly a number of strengths that we have every right to be proud of become who we are and what we're known for. For instance, I cease to be Joanna, the original flourishing introvert who demonstrates strengths and capabilities alongside other parts of my personality. Instead, I risk becoming the faceless go-to on one particular thing. But whatever you do, comes the warning, stay in your lane, girl. Now, don't get me wrong. Most people I work with hold their competencies high, as many times, and rightly so, they've worked hard to develop and refine them. But our competencies don't completely define us. Somewhere along the line, we've become so comfortable and secure talking first from competence that we develop a comfortable groove, or dare I say, a rut. Genius move, you might initially think. If I can occupy and influence people with my competence, I can avoid having to talk about and show them who I really am. Phew. Just seen we've got a LinkedIn viewer from, I think that was Leeds. You're very welcome, whoever you are in Leeds. But at what point does expertise stop being an asset and start becoming a hiding place? How many of us keep gathering more qualifications, more certificates, more diplomas? I know more than most that they are great hiding places because guilty as charged, my lad. I think this will illustrate my point beautifully. Many years ago, I was working with a colleague, Richard, as he was developing a board game exercise for influencing skills program. And the two axes were visibility and credibility, both vitally important to ethical influence. The idea was that you made a move on each axis in order to progress, both in a sort of step sequence, one up and one along. Richard, as an out-and-out extrovert, made an assertion that, of course, visibility comes first. I remember turning to him aghast because for me, it had to be credibility first. And I do think that's the natural or default path for we introverts, don't you? Oh, how easy it is to get stuck in our ways of what should be. But I've been in this world of people development for long enough to know better than shoulding all over people. Because in reality, there's no one way to make your move to become more influential. It's going to depend on the circumstances, the opportunities as you spot them, and of course, your intention. Richard told me how he paced the corridors of power, looking purposeful, of course, hoping that the right person would emerge from their office just as he was passing. I remember balking at that prospect, only to find myself comfortably doing the same many years later. Here's the difference, though. I was able to do it once I had credibility, the credibility I felt I needed under my belt. So for me, it's still credibility and then influence. visibility, but I'm not going to avoid the visibility piece. So what we've looked at, typically what happens, I suppose, the groove, the habit or the rut that we can make for ourselves. But I think it's worth going a little deeper to explore what keeps us in that rut. The first one is linked to what we've just been exploring. People have shared with me their overwhelming dislike of being in the limelight, being front and center, being visible to all. Some even go so far as to describe it as a hatred or a fear. I've never felt that strongly about being visible, but in the past, I have absolutely been uncomfortable with it. Then my chosen profession, this of training, coaching, supervision, etc., meant I would need to be in front of people day in, day out. So I had to get over myself, as I wasn't prepared to throw away what I loved doing. And I think it's so important that we find what it is we love doing and do that. Was it daunting? Well, to begin with, absolutely it was. Was it worth doing? Hell yes. And the lessons I've learned on the way and the development I've experienced by choosing visibility once I have the credibility is worth its weight in gold. And the reality is being visible does leave you open to scrutiny, and on more than one level. Firstly, we can be caught off guard when people scrutinize our input, our expertise, our opinions. And under that scrutiny, it's easy for self-doubt to creep in and for our inner critic to want to get involved. If you followed me for a while, you'll know that my inner critic is called Gladys, and she's almost champing at the bit in those moments, wanting to draw my attention to the potential danger I'm letting myself in for. Typically, inner critics are trying to keep us safe, but they go too far. And have you ever noticed how quickly our minds can turn visibility into danger, even when nothing dangerous is actually happening? I know I have, and there are some of the questions that flash through my mind at the speed of light. I'm going to share some, and I wonder how many of them you'll recognize. How quickly do I need to respond to that? What will they think of me if I can't answer it well enough? How sure am I of my ground? Are they testing me or questioning my competence? And finally, why, oh, why did I set myself up for this? Tell me you haven't had those types of questions loom large when you're being scrutinized. And be honest now. And it's to be expected, because typically what's happening here is our think, say, think communication process is being sent into a tailspin. As we know, introverts prefer to think things through before they respond, so they can answer to the best of their ability. And it's thinking things through and that pause that often gets mistaken for us lacking confidence or not being sure. So the expectation of immediacy when we're put on the spot can freak us out, and streams of consciousness are not really our thing. The question to really ask ourselves in moments like that is, who really expects immediacy? Often it's a bit of a fantasy, because it's more about what we imagine people want than what they're actually demanding. What helps either way is being really well prepared, including anticipating and prepping for the worst possible question you might be asked. I encourage all of my presentation skills delegates to do just that. Because if you can handle the worst question, the rest feel far easier. Those ways of handling questions that buy you valuable time are priceless. So make sure you use them confidently. Now, time to get a bit more uncomfortable. We're still sticking with scrutiny. Are you ready? You see, there's more we potentially open ourselves up to on the scrutiny front, and that's the scrutiny of our physical being. Yeah, exactly. I grew up being scrutinized physically by my mother, and I remember to this day asking her just before I went out, I asked her if I looked okay. I was about 15 years old, I think, and her response was, "Why? Who's going to look at you?" That stung more than I can tell you. But more importantly, it deepened my sense of insecurity and made physical scrutiny so hard to bear. That took decades to ease. And I'm only going to say ease because it's not completely gone even now, more than 50 years later. In fact, I'm still a little uncomfortable looking at, I take mother has just said that sounds like her mother. I think many of us had mothers who would say things like that, actually. And I'm still a little bit uncomfortable looking at photos or videos of me, looking at myself on screen. But these days, I've decided to accept that I am who I am. And having a photographer as brilliant as the fabulous Brigitte, who you saw on the introduction to this show, Brigitte at Nooks, has helped so much. Thank you, Brigitte. I owe you a big time. She makes the whole process fun, and I never thought I would be saying that. Now, in order for me to overcome the physical scrutiny, to overcome the physical scrutiny, these days I wear something I love rather than what might be traditional or expected. Yeah, I'm in my sassy, rebellious era. I've shed the camouflage. I've shed the all black, which I used to wear for a while, thinking that would make me invisible. And I've replaced it with the equivalent of a feather boa and sequins. Metaphorically, you understand, because I'm not a feather boa girl, but neither am I hiding for anyone now, and certainly not hiding for my own sake or hiding from myself. So I wonder what camouflage still lingers for you even now, and do feel free to pop it in the chat. And also pop in the chat whether your camouflage still serves you, or maybe it simply keeps you small in very manicured or curated ways. Because camouflage doesn't do us much favor in the long run. One thing I can't avoid talking about is the emotional toil we spend in the name of protecting ourselves for many and any eventualities. It's how we do our bit to create psychological safety and ensure we can go into situations as confidently as possible. For all those that I work with, preparation is so important, and I'm not here to discourage it because I know how well it serves me. Of course, you may be that rare type of introverts who likes to wing it, but that's not me. Word of warning here, though, watch out for the very thin, easily blurred lines between wanting to do what's necessary to feel ready and disappearing down the over-preparation rabbit hole. Knowing when enough is such an important skill to learn. And here's what I've found. the greater the credibility I feel through authority, etc., the easier it is for me to know when enough prep is enough. Camouflage takes many sneaky forms, you know. And here's the not so comfortable question, perhaps. Are we genuinely preparing, or are we postponing visibility until we think we're impossible to criticize? I'm not sure there's any such thing as important as impossible to criticize. And one of the things I think is so important for us to be able to do is learn how to hear and stay in the conversation when people are disagreeing with us. So let me venture into my final question, which is, what is it that you're actually trying to hide or disguise? Toughie, that one. I'll answer for myself, as I think that may help you to face your own reality. What I've spent years hiding is my vulnerability. The fact that I am, even in my dotage, a work in progress. And honestly, I hope I always am work in progress. But in the professional circles I operate in, vulnerability is rarely seen as a virtue or a strength. We think the only acceptable version of us is the highly polished, got it all together version. And frankly, I find that very sad. I remember the first time I heard Professor Amy Edmondson talk about situational humility in the context of leaders co-creating psychological safety. And a huge penny dropped for me when I heard her talking about that. We have become so well masked up and camouflaged because many of us are afraid to say, I don't have an answer, or I'm still working on that, or I've never thought of that. I'm making it part of my mission to share how my work in progress is going, what I'm learning and what I'm discovering about me. And the more of us that could do that with people who love and support us, the more we're going to be able to develop and be ourselves. I think the question I'm now holding is, do we even know who we are once we drop the mask and strip away the camouflage? In fact, that's today's pebble. Takes some holding, this one. Today's pebble, that's bigger than last, that's going to create bigger ripples in the bigger pond, is, are you brave enough to peel off the mask, peel off the camouflage, and see who is really there? And as you see yourself, maybe for the first time in a long time, I ask that you choose to love yourself unconditionally, knowing you are still a work in progress and on your own journey. I hope that you can do that for yourself. And High Tech Mother is saying, doing that every day. And that really fills my heart with joy. I hope you're able to do that. And if you want someone alongside you as you take those first steps, you know where I am. I told you the pebbles would be bigger, meaning the ripples will reach further. Is that a big enough pebble for you? Of course, you could just hear my questions at a superficial level, watch the ripples pass you by and nod along as you're prepping supper, doing the ironing or the scrolling. But I'm encouraging you to go deeper than that. I'm encouraging you to feel that question with your whole being and truly face the real you in the mirror, as I did and I'm continuing to do. I realized how successful my camouflage had been in preventing me from being seen. And when I realized it, I felt a bit sick. How am I ever going to lead a movement and leave a legacy in people if I'm not prepared to be visible myself? Recently, I've given myself permission to be okay with big face photos, being on camera in live calls, shows like this, being visible to the world. How could I expect to help the Josephs and the Joannas of this world to flourish if I was hiding too much of the time? And that thought gives me the credibility I need to be able to talk to anyone, anywhere, about the value in stripping off the camouflage and bearing all, metaphorically, of course. I continually give myself permission to show up, sharing bits of my journey with you. And you know what? I'm bolder and more confident as a result of it. I didn't necessarily need to be braver beforehand. I just needed the right intentions. And I listened to a fabulous talk last night from Carl at the celebration event I was at with my clients, who talked about getting older gives us permission to be bolder. And I just love that. And I hope that actually all of us can show up more as ourselves as we go on. That's what I hope for you. That's what I hope for all of us. Now, all that's left for me to do is to thank you for taking the time to join me, either live or virtually. It may well be that you want to watch, or need to even to watch this back again, so that you can really feel my invitation to see yourself fully as you really are. I so appreciate having you along, as although we may be on our own journeys, there is magic that happens when we allow our paths to cross, as they have in this last 30 or so minutes. Thank you to my production team. You are, as always, my rock. And I look forward to seeing you the next time. And of course, it's down to you to let me know whether this felt new, whether it felt improved, or whether it was what you expected. Thank you.